It's your open source advocate, and I'm back, and I have done this 3 times now without audio, and I think I finally fixed the problem, so I should be really proficient at this one. We're going to do WordPress with Docker and Docker Compose today, and it's really straightforward, so I think you're going to enjoy this one. If you've been thinking about putting in a WordPress site or setting up WordPress for someone else, I'm going to give you just the easiest way that you can imagine to do this and host it. So before I get started, I want to say thank you so much to my patrons over at Patreon. I truly appreciate your support. And thank you to my subscribers at YouTube. I truly appreciate the subscriptions that you guys are giving me, and for the likes and everything else, because that really tells YouTube's algorithms that I'm doing something right, which is great. If you enjoy this, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and then click the little notification bell so you can find out when I get other videos out. I try to do one a week to make sure that you're getting plenty of content, and I hope that they're helpful for you. Alright, let's get into this install here. So out on the Docker Docs site, you'll find this, and I will link this in the description. And if you don't have Docker and Docker Compose installed yet, if you're running Debian or Ubuntu, in my show notes, which I'll also link in the description, so it'll be at shownotes.opensourceisawesome.com, I will put the instructions on how to install Docker and Docker Compose on Ubuntu, which will make it much simpler for you. But there's instructions out there for all different systems, Windows, Linux, Mac OS X. So just get out there and find the instructions that you need for those things, because Docker and Docker Compose can make it so easy to spin up these sites once you get them installed and start working with them. Alright, if you move down on this page, you'll see that really we're just going to create a folder, pretty easy. And then we're going to use this little Docker Compose file. We're going to modify the information that's in here, but this is kind of their template. So all you have to do is highlight this right here and copy it. And again, it'll be linked in the description. So copy. And then I'm just going to go to my terminal here, and I'm already SSH'd into my server that I run here at home. It's just a laptop that I run as a server because it's just me and my family. And I'm going to say make a new directory, and we'll call this, I don't know, Pi WordPress. So I'm just going to pretend that I'm going to make a website about Raspberry Pi. So I'll just call this Pi WordPress. And then I'm going to change into that directory. And in here you'll see it's empty. So we're going to create a new file with nano and then space docker-compose.yml. Okay, so docker-compose.yml, and we're going to open that up. And we're going to use Control-Shift and V like Victor to paste in the text that we just copied from that instructions page. We're going to move to the top, and right here you can see it's version 3.3 for Docker Compose is what it's going to be using. So we're going to move down. So it's got this DB section for database. And if you look down here at the WordPress section, it says it depends on the DB. So it needs to install the DB image and container, which is MySQL. And then it'll set up WordPress and connect it to that DB container for us. So this makes it really straightforward, okay? Now, we're going to move down here, and we're going to see that there's a volume that it creates called DB data, and it's going to be /var/lib/MySQL inside the container. So right side is container, left side is host. So on the host, it's going to create this little volume, and it's going to be pointing to /var/lib/MySQL. It's going to reset always or restart always. So if you reboot your server, or if the system crashes for some reason and you bring it back up, it's going to restart the container automatically. And you'll see both of these containers have restart always set. Okay. So if we go back up, now we have a few environment variables that we need to look at and take care of. So we've got a root password, a MySQL root password. So this is the password for the root user. So make this a strong password. Don't use the password I'm going to use, but make it a strong password with upper, lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols, and make it long, 10, 15, 20 characters if you want to. So I'm going to do a really not strong password, and we're going to do that. And then here for the database name, you can leave it as WordPress if you want to, but I want to name my database something that makes me think of what my site's going to be about. So I'm going to call it Raspberry Pi. Don't put any spaces in your database name, and don't put any capitals, just make it all lowercase. For your MySQL user, you should change that from WordPress as well and make it a more personable username. So in my case, my name's Brian. You should put your name. And then for the MySQL password, this is the password for this user you just gave it a name for. So again, make this a strong, long password. So we'll call this RPIPASSW0RD exclamation 4. How about that? That's a nice long password, but it still uses password, so you shouldn't use this password, okay? Now, once you've got that set, you're going to move down to the WordPress section. So right here, I need to change this because this is talking about the ports that it's going to use. So the left side here is for the host, and the right side is for the container. You don't want to mess with this one. You just want to change this if you already have something using port 8000, which I do. If you don't, it's okay. Just leave it as 8000. But I have something using it, so I'm going to change it to 9021. And this is set to always restart, which is great. That's what we want. Now we're going to move down to the environment variables for the WordPress section. Leave this one the same, db:3306. Make sure you leave that the same. Don't change it. This next one, db user. That's this user up here that you just created. So make sure to type it in exactly the same down here. We want those two values to match. For the DB password, it's this password that you just created for that user. So make sure again that you type it in and the values match. So we're going to do RP. There we go. So that should match. I just need to double check it. It doesn't. So see, I've got it. I've got something wrong. That will cause you a problem if you don't make those match. So make sure that they match exactly with case, everything you spell, every symbol you use. Finally, the DB name, that is this name right here. So again, make sure that they match exactly. Okay. Double check everything, make sure that it all matches, and once you're happy that everything is the same on both sets of data, you can save using Control O and then hit Enter, and then Control X to exit out of Nano. Now we'll do an ls, and you see there's our docker compose.yaml file, so we'll just clear this out. Now to run this, we want to use docker-compose up-d. So this just says use docker compose to bring up the file that I just said, all the stuff in that file, and then run those as a daemon in the background so when it finishes in the terminal, it doesn't just quit. So I'm going to hit Enter. It's going to go out there, it's going to pull down the images for MySQL and for WordPress. It's going to create containers out of those and link them together with a network in the background in the Docker space. So we'll just let that run and then we'll be back. Alright, when everything finishes up, you should see something like this where it has a db_1 and it should be kind of that name that you gave earlier, and then WordPress_1, and they should be each have a done out here, which means that Docker Compose finished, it started the containers, and it thinks everything's good. Now up here where it says already exists for me, you may not see this. It may have to pull down all of these things. I have other containers already running on this system that it may have been able to go out there and say, oh, I've already got this image, I don't need to pull it down. So it was checking as it went along, so that's why I got this. You may not get this, it may have to pull them all down, so just be aware of that. Okay. Now I'm going to clear the terminal again. So it thinks everything's running. The best way to check that is to go back to our browser, come to a new tab, and we're going to type in the IP address of your server. So in my case, my server is 192.168.7.125. And then you're going to put a colon and the port number that you set inside of your Docker Compose. So in my case, I did 9021. It was defaulted to 8000. Okay, so I had a little error, and if you weren't paying attention, I had misspelled the name of the database on the WordPress side. So don't do that, because I misspelled it and I didn't catch it right away. So I went back and fixed it. It's no big deal. Brought everything back up, and here we are. So if you're successful when you go to the IP address and the port number, you should see this initial WordPress wizard, install wizard. You want to pick the language for your country. In my case, English United States is detected, and it picked it. That's great. I'm going to hit continue. If yours is different and you want a different one, just scroll through here and find your language and pick it. Once you do that, you're going to come here and give your site a title. So here you can see I've already done Raspberry Pi. Username, I'm just going to pick my username, so let me make sure I type it the way I actually want it. I'm going to give it a different strong password, but make sure it's strong. If you don't, here's what it's going to do. It's going to tell you it's a weak password, and it's going to make you check this box that says you have to confirm that you want to do this. Don't do that, okay? Make it a strong password, and it will tell you that it's strong, and that little checkbox goes away. Then put in your email address. On this last checkbox, if you want search engines to find your site, leave this unchecked. If you want people to be able to search Google and find your site, leave this unchecked. If you're making some kind of private site and you don't really want search engines to be indexing your site, then check this box. That's all I can tell you. It doesn't mean that it'll stop them, it just says discourage, okay? Once you've got everything set the way you want it, just click on this little button. It's going to try to install WordPress. And it's going to come here and tell you success is what you should get, and you should see your username, and then it's going to hide your password. When you're ready, click on login, and you can try your email address and your password. And then hit login. You can hit remember me if you want, but just log in. And you're at your admin page for WordPress. So really everything's done and it's installed, but you're only accessing WordPress through the IP address and port number right now. If you don't want this to be the way that you do this, then we got to do a little bit more. So you can do one of two things. You can use something like NGinX Proxy Manager, which is what I'm going to use, and you can proxy the traffic from that to your WordPress site, and you can use kind of a wildcard domain. So my wildcard domain is routemehome.org. I want to briefly explain what I mean by a wildcard. So I have an A record set up, and if I do anything, so I can type anything.routemehome.org, it goes out and tries to go to my server, and my NGinX Proxy Manager is always going to take me to this congratulations page. It doesn't matter what I put up here if it's not an actual site. So I can try anything, and I can try something, and it's going to do the same thing. So no matter what I try, it's never going to go anywhere unless I actually have an entry in the NGinX Proxy Manager set up to actually go there. So if I go to Analytics, if I type it right, there we go. See, now I get to an actual site that I'm running. So the wildcard setup isn't real hard, and I'll show you kind of how I do it. So you can do this on any host that you have, probably, as long as you have access to your DNS records. Let me get signed in here to GoDaddy, and I've shown this before, so you may have seen this in the past. But let me log into my Bitwarden here. And then we'll log into GoDaddy. Oh, heck, I didn't mean to do that. Go back. All right, we'll log into GoDaddy. And I'm going to jump down here to my routemehome.org. And when I come to the DNS, you're going to see an entry with an asterisk. So basically, this entry right here, I just have an asterisk, and then I have my home IP address, and that's what routes everything to that address. So when anything goes to routemehome.org, it knows to go to my server, and my server says, do I have an entry for that in the NGinX Proxy Manager? And if it doesn't, it just throws it away. It's not going to get you anywhere. It's just going to say, it's going to give you a generic congratulations page. But if it does, then NGinX Proxy Manager tells it where to go. Now the other way you can do this is you can set up an A record in your DNS. So if you have GoDaddy, if you have Hover, if you have Gandhi.net, whoever does your DNS for your domains, go into your DNS and set up an A record. And if this is a public site, you want to give them the public IP address. Now if it's a private IP, if you're running this on your home network, that's not going to work. Now the other way to do this is to come down and make an A record. If you want to make an A record, you come down here under your DNS entries in GoDaddy at least, and you click on Add. Now each domain registrar has a different way of adding your A records, but it should be fairly obvious workflow depending on who it is. So here you click Add, then you select that you want to create an A record, and then you would put in the subdomain of your domain, or just the domain if it's not even going to be a subdomain, but the subdomain that you want to create. So let's just say that I wanted to call it Pi Home. And then here I would put in the IP address of my home. So whatever that is, 67.208.23.45. I mean, I don't know, that's not my home IP address, but if that was it, that's what I would put here. If you're running this on DigitalOcean or on a VPS like Linode, or if you're running on SSD nodes, you want to find out what your public IP address is for the server that you're running it on, and that's what you would put here. Here on the time to live, you can choose a half hour. You can do a custom time, and sometimes I'll just knock off this last little thing here so that I get 600 seconds, which is about 10 minutes, and then hit save, and that's going to add a new A record for your domain. So in order to do this, first we need to make a change. You don't want to go set up your URL and try to point it here. It's not going to work. It's going to keep adding this port number to the end of the URL every time you try to load the page, and it's going to drive you bananas. So first you want to come to Settings, General. So right here you see it's got the IP address and the port. So every time you try to hit this, even if you're forwarding it with an A record or using NGinX Proxy Manager, when you type in that URL, it's going to throw this port on the end of it. It's just going to, I'm telling you, it's going to drive you nuts. So take this out, and you want to take everything out except http:// and then you're going to put in the name of the site that you want to use. So I've already set this up a couple of times, so let me just create a new one for you guys. So we'll just call this pyhome.routemehome.org. Okay, so this is my URL. Now this isn't going to work for you guys, so don't do this. But in my case, this is what I'm setting. I'm going to copy this right out of the web page address or the WordPress address URL field, and I'm going to copy it into the site address field. I'm going to paste it. Okay, so they should match. Up here, you want to just change this probably. This is the generic WordPress kind of subtag or whatever. You know, change it to something that matches your site. My Pi Home Info, whatever, right? You can call it whatever you want. Make it interesting. This is your email address. You don't want to mess with that. If you did set the wrong language, you can change it right here. Okay. Wouldn't mess with subscriber. You can change the role for people who log in or who sign into your, register for your site. I wouldn't. I would leave them as a subscriber. Otherwise, you're giving them more privilege than they should have, probably. For your time zone, you can either pick the time zone or you can go up and you can kind of choose the correct time zone based on location. So I'm in America, Chicago. Let me find that. Am I on the right country? No, I'm not there yet. Let's keep going. So yes, right here, Chicago. Okay, that's me. So I've set my time zone. Next, you can pick the format for the dates in the system, the way that it shows them in WordPress, and the format for the time. So if you don't like this date and time style, you can change them to whatever you pick here. And then finally, you can say, I don't want the week to start on Monday. I want it to start on Sunday, or you might want it to start on Thursday. It's up to you. Just pick that and then click on Save. Now, when you click on Save Changes, because we've told this, we want it to use this URL, it's going to try to reload this page using that URL. It is no longer going to use the IP address, and we haven't set this up yet. So it's not going to work. It's going to give you a 404 error. It's okay. We're about to go fix that. Just know that it's going to happen when you do that. So be ready. I clicked it, 404 not found, totally expected. You see it changed the URL right here for me. So now I'm going to go to my NGinX Proxy Manager. I'm going to go into my host section. I'm going to add a new host. And I think I called that my home, or Pi Home, right? P-I-H-O-M-E. Don't forget what you called it in there. .routemehome.org. If you do forget, just click back on the 404 and you can see exactly what you called it. Just make sure you type it the same. Okay, so pyhome.routemehome.org. Now hit Tab, okay? That will make sure that this gets set. Next, we need the IP address of our Docker system. So I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to use ifconfig, and I'm going to go look for Docker 0. So I'm going to scroll up here until I see Docker 0, and it's right here. And I'm going to grab the inet address of Docker 0. I'm just going to right click, and I can do copy, or you can do Control-Shift-C to copy. It doesn't matter. And then I'm going to go back over here to my site, and I'm going to paste that in right here. So I'm telling the server, because NGinX Proxy Manager is running on the same server as WordPress and all the other stuff that I have. And I'm telling NGinX Proxy Manager, hey, just go to this Docker IP address because it's already running on your server. And then I'm going to give it the port number that I set, which was 9021. I'm going to tell it block common exploits right here. and then I'm going to leave it as publicly accessible. Now, before I do anything else, before I try to go get SSL, before I try to do anything else, I'm just going to hit save. And I'm going to make sure that I can get to that site that I just created. So I'm going to go down here to pyhome.routemehome.org. And here we are. We're at our generic WordPress page, which is great. That's what we want. But again, it's not HTTPS yet. This is just HTTP. If this is all you're aiming for, good job. You're there. You're done. Get started doing all of your setup and your admin stuff. But I want secure. So I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to edit this entry. So I'm going to click on the three dots and I'm going to click on edit. I'm going to go to SSL. I'm going to click on this little none and it's going to create a drop down, and I'm going to click on request a new SSL certificate. I'm going to click force SSL because I want to make sure that anybody who comes to my page comes to it through an SSL encrypted address. If you don't have your email in here already, put your email in. This is for Let's Encrypt. They will not spam you. They're just making sure that they can reach you if something is wrong with your certificates for some reason. So make sure to fill this in. And then finally, when you fill that in, this will enable and you can check it, which says you agree to the Let's Encrypt terms of service. If you want to read them, click on that link and you can read the terms of service. Once you're ready, make sure these are all set. Request, force, email, and I agree. Click on save. It's going to take a second because it's going to go out to Let's Encrypt and say, hey, I've got this site and I want you to give me certificates for it. Let's Encrypt is going to challenge that site and then issue certificates if it can reach it on port 80. It has to be reachable on port 80. If it just goes away like it did for mine, you're set. So when I click on this, now we get our HTTPS enabled site. We don't get an SSL warning or anything like that. We're set. We're able to hit our WordPress site and we're good. Now, if you want to get to your admin page, you want to go to /wp-admin. And now you're going to log in with your username and your strong password, or your email and your strong password. Either one, it doesn't really matter. Now you can go out and get themes. You can go out and get all kinds of plugins and all kinds of really cool stuff for WordPress. And believe me, WordPress can just be made to look like any kind of crazy site you want. It's really amazing, open source, self-hosted software. But now you're set up and you're good, and you've got this all running in Docker, and it didn't take very long. Hopefully this was really helpful to you. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along on the journey with us, and I'll talk to you next time.